Welcome to the BDCOM GPON tutorial series. In this tutorial, we will walk you through the process of searching for an ONU serial number or SN on a GPON OLT using both the command line interface and the graphical user interface. Now the question, what is SN? SN refers to the serial number. In GPON architecture, the OLT communicates with each ONU using a unique vendor-assigned serial number that identifies the ONU. The GPON ONU SN follows a standardized format defined by the ITU-T. It is an 8-byte or 64-bit value that uniquely identifies each ONU, and it is typically represented in either hexadecimal or ASCII format. This 64-bit serial number consists of two parts. The first 32 bits represent the vendor ID. The remaining 32 bits represent the vendor-specific ID. Let's take a closer look at both the vendor ID and the vendor-specific ID. The vendor ID makes up the first 32 bits of an ONUs serial number and identifies the device's manufacturer. Assigned by the ITU Telecommunications Standardization Bureau, it appears as 4 uppercase ASCII characters or a hexadecimal number. For example, BDCOM uses BDCM, Huawei uses HWTC, ZTE uses ZTEG, and FiberHome uses FHTT. Each ASCII value also has a corresponding hexadecimal form. BDCM translates to 42443 and HWTC translates to 4857543. The hexadecimal values for ZTEG and FHTT are shown here as well. The ITU publicly releases and maintains this entire table of GPON ONU vendors, and the value is fixed for every vendor, ensuring consistent identification and reliable manufacturer tracing for every ONU. The vendor-specific ID occupies the last 32 bits of the ONU's serial number and uniquely differentiates each device produced by the same manufacturer. Its format varies by vendor and may appear as hexadecimal or any other form. The numerical range spans the entire addressable space for a 32-bit system, a series of 4 hexadecimal bytes, providing more than 4 billion possible unique identifiers. This value is automatically generated by the manufacturer. For example, BDCOM derives it from the lower 32 bits of the ONU's 48-bit MAC address. If a BDCOM ONU has the MAC address 0055B12911563, then its vendor-specific ID is simply the last 32 bits, B1291563. BDCOM ONUs can represent their SN in 2 primary formats, ASCII plus hex and hex plus hex. In the first example, the format is vendor ID in ASCII format and vendor-specific ID in hex format. The format representation is as highlighted, with a total of 12 characters. Considering an ONU with MAC address 40924927EA7A, the vendor ID is BDCM in ASCII format, and the vendor-specific ID is derived from the last 32 bits of the MAC, which is 4927EA7A. By combining the vendor ID and the vendor-specific ID, the full SN in ASCII plus hex format becomes BDCM 4927EA7A. In the second example, the format is vendor ID and vendor-specific ID. Both are in hexadecimal format. The format representation is as highlighted, with a total of 16 characters. Considering an ONU with MAC address 0055B1291563, the vendor ID is 424443 4D in hexadecimal format, of BDCM, and the vendor-specific ID is the last 32 bits of the MAC, which is B1291563. By combining the vendor ID and vendor-specific ID, the full SN in hex plus hex format becomes 424443 B1291563. Now, here's a question for you. What is the full SN in hex plus hex format for the first example? And what is the full SN in ASCII plus hex format for the second example? Comment your answers below. Let's begin searching for an ONU SN on a GPON OLT using the CLI. First, connect to the OLT through the console, SSH, or Telnet. Once you're logged in, switch to privilege mode to continue. To query an ONU, simply enter the lookup command followed by the SN in one of the two formats we discussed earlier. Here's how it works. For the hex plus hex SN format, enter show GPON ONU-information SN followed by the 16-character hexadecimal SN. For the ASCII plus hex format, enter show GPON ONU-information SN followed by the 12-character SN. Once the command is executed, the OLT will return detailed information about the ONU, its status, model, whether it's online or offline, the offline reason, and more. This process gives you a quick and reliable way to confirm whether an ONU is active and ready to deliver services from the OLT. Now let's see how to search for an ONU SN in a GPON OLT using the GUI. Start by opening your browser and logging into the OLT using its management IP and your user credentials. From the main dashboard, go to Real-Time Monitor and click ONU Info. Select the GPON port where the ONU is connected. Then, use the search box at the top middle of the page. Enter the ONU SN and press Enter on your keyboard. If the ONU isn't on that port, you'll get a pop-up notification. If it is, the system will highlight the ONU and display its details. If you don't know the exact GPON port for a specific SN, you may need to repeat this process across each PON port until you locate the ONU. For more tutorials, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your questions in the comments. Thanks for watching.